When my wife passed away, my son said he would not be at the funeral because he had important things to do. As it turned out later, he went to a friend's birthday party. When he asked me for money, I said, "No, son, your important things are just beginning." But it was only the beginning, a betrayal that ignited the fire of justice in me, and now I will make him feel the same pain as I did. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The February wind cut through my black coat as I stood alone beside Margaret's grave. 42 years of marriage reduced to a handful of mourners and flowers that would freeze by morning. The pastor's words about eternal rest felt hollow against the sound of dirt hitting her casket. But what echoed louder was the silence from the empty space where my son should have been standing. The morning of the funeral, Brian's call had shattered what little composure I had left. "Dad, I can't make it today. Important business meeting came up." "Your mother's funeral, Brian." My voice cracked on her name. "She's already gone, Dad. This meeting could change my life." I'd stared at the phone after he hung up. Margaret's funeral dress still hanging on our bedroom door. Change his life. As if losing the woman who'd given him everything hadn't already changed mine forever. 1 month later, Brian showed up at my door wearing sneakers that cost more than Margaret's last chemotherapy copay. His smile was practiced, the kind he used when he wanted something. He always had that gift, making his needs sound like emergencies and his wants sound like necessities. "Dad, you look good. Really good." He settled into Margaret's chair without asking, his designer watch catching the afternoon light. "Listen, I've got this incredible investment opportunity. $15,000 would get me in on the ground floor." I watched him lean forward, animated now. This was the same enthusiasm he'd shown describing why he couldn't attend his mother's funeral. "It's exactly the kind of thing Mom would have wanted me to pursue. You know how she always believed in my potential." The mention of Margaret hit like a physical blow. "Your mother believed in a lot of things, Brian?" His face shifted when I didn't immediately reach for my checkbook. "Dad, this is time sensitive. The opportunity won't wait." "Neither did your mother's funeral." He had the decency to look uncomfortable for exactly 3 seconds. "That was different. This is about our future. Mine and Chelsea's. Mom would understand." I walked him to the door without writing a check, his frustrated goodbye hanging in the air long after his car disappeared down the street. The next afternoon, Stanley knocked on my door holding his phone like evidence. "Robert, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but..." He fumbled with the screen, his weathered fingers navigating to Facebook. "I saw Brian that Saturday, the day of Margaret's service." The photos loaded slowly. Brian in a party hat, arm around some college buddy, a birthday cake blazing with candles in the background. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., exactly when I'd been lowering Margaret into the ground. Stanley cleared his throat. Posted them himself. Guess he forgot some folks might see. I stared at the screen long after Stanley left, my son's laughing face frozen in digital permanence. Important business meeting. The lie felt heavier now, crushing something inside my chest that had been holding on to hope. Margaret's voice whispered from memory, "He's just finding his way, Robert. Be patient." But patience had limits, and mine had just been buried 6 feet under. The drive home felt longer than usual. Brian's hands gripped the steering wheel as he rehearsed explanations for Chelsea, each version sounding more pathetic than the last. The apartment building came into view, modern glass and steel that screamed success while hiding the mountain of debt beneath. Chelsea was exactly where he'd left her, laptop open on the kitchen island, ring light positioned for optimal Instagram angles. Her phone case sparkled with rhinestones that cost more than most people's groceries, but the anxiety in her eyes told a different story. The old man said no. Brian dropped his keys on the granite countertop they'd bought on credit. Can you believe that? $15,000 means nothing to him. Chelsea's perfectly manicured nails stopped typing. "We need that money, Brian." The casino called again about the balance. 12 grand doesn't just disappear. The number hung between them like a confession. 12,000 in gambling debts, plus the credit cards maxed for her content creation setup, plus the BMW payment she'd insisted they needed for her brand image. Their lifestyle looked gorgeous through Valencia filters, but reality had sharper edges. Your mom always babied you, Chelsea said, closing the laptop with calculated force. Time to use that. Play the grief card. Brian loosened his tie, another expensive prop in their elaborate performance. It's been a month. The funeral thing will blow over. Will it? Because we're running out of time here. She gestured around their showcase apartment. You think this pays for itself? My brand partnerships fell through. Your poker streak isn't exactly profitable. And Daddy Dearest just shut down our easiest option. The truth sat ugly between them. 3 years of marriage built on credit and expectations, with Robert's bank account as their safety net. Brian had always known his father would come through, had counted on it like gravity. $15,000 isn't even that much for him, Brian muttered. Man worked at Wells Fargo for 30 years. He's sitting on a decent retirement fund. The house is paid off. Plus whatever life insurance your mom had. Chelsea's voice dropped to business planning mode. We'll make him feel guilty about not helping family. Tell him you're depressed, need therapy costs covered. They spent the next hour crafting their approach like marketing a product. Brian would emphasize his emotional struggles. Chelsea would mention their upcoming anniversary. They'd invoke Margaret's memory strategically, remind Robert of family obligations. The birthday party photos never came up in their calculations. The beauty is, he feels guilty already, Chelsea said, refreshing her Instagram analytics. Losing a spouse does that. Makes people desperate to hold on to what family they have left. Brian nodded, already practicing his wounded son routine. Tomorrow he'd call with trembling voice and carefully chosen words. His father's weakness had always been family, specifically the family Margaret had built around her unconditional love. Besides, Chelsea added, typing up a new post about gratitude and family bonds, what's he going to do with all that money anyway? Sit alone in that house and count it? Meanwhile, Robert sat in his empty house, Stanley's phone still fresh in his memory, counting something entirely different. The house felt different now. Every photo, every memory took on new meaning as I moved through rooms that still smelled like Margaret's lavender perfume. I found myself in the living room, pulling out photo albums we'd assembled over decades of Brian's life. There he was at graduation, magna cum laude from Gonzaga University. $80,000 in tuition that Margaret and I had somehow scraped together, her pulling double shifts at the hospital while I worked overtime reviewing loan applications. Brian's smile and that cap and gown looked so genuine, so full of promise. Next page. His wedding day. Another $25,000 for the reception he'd insisted would set the right tone for his new marriage. Margaret had sold her grandmother's jewelry to help pay for Chelsea's dress. It's what mothers do, she'd said when I protested. I kept turning pages, each image a financial sacrifice disguised as parental love. The down payment on his first house, $25,000 from our retirement savings, his business loan when the web development company failed, $12,000. Credit card bailouts when Chelsea's spending got out of control, another $8,000. My old notebook sat in the desk drawer, the one where I'd tracked every family expense with banker's precision. The running total made my stomach clench. $183,000 over 15 years. Not including the smaller amounts. Car insurance, holiday gifts, the graduation trip to Europe we'd somehow funded. Margaret had made me promise during those final hospital days when morphine couldn't quite mask her pain. Promise me you'll take care of Brian. Her voice was paper thin but determined. He's still learning how to be responsible. Marriage will help him grow up. I'd squeezed her hand, feeling how fragile she'd become. I'll always be there for him, Maggie. Always. I worry sometimes, she'd whispered, about his spending, his choices. But he has a good heart, Robert. He just needs time. Time. I'd given him 35 years, and Margaret had given him everything she had. She'd worked herself into exhaustion defending his potential, making excuses for his failures, enabling what she chose to call growing pains. The photo album fell shut as I reached for Stanley's phone again. Those birthday party images burned brighter now, illuminated by decades of disappointed hope. Brian laughing with friends while I'd stood alone at his mother's grave. Important business meeting. The lie felt obscene next to Margaret's final request. But Margaret would understand what I had to do. She'd been a nurse. She knew that sometimes healing required cutting away infected tissue. She'd also been a wife who'd watched me make hard decisions for 42 years, who'd trusted my judgment when emotions ran too hot. Our son had made his choice at that birthday party. Now I would make mine. Robert woke with unusual clarity. 30 years in banking had taught him exactly how to find information, and 3 decades of financial investigations had given him tools most people never imagined existed. The coffee shop downtown buzzed with morning energy as Tom Wilson slid into the booth across from him. Tom had been Robert's colleague at Wells Fargo for 20 years before retiring to consulting work, and his expertise in credit monitoring remained sharp as ever. Good to see you, Robert. How are you holding up? Taking things one day at a time. Robert stirred his coffee methodically. Actually, I wanted to ask you about credit reporting services. I'm concerned about Brian's financial situation. Tom's expression grew serious. Parental concern or professional curiosity? Both. He asked for $15,000 last week. Claims it's for investment opportunities, but something feels off. Credit reports show everything these days, Tom said, pulling out his tablet. Payment histories, debt-to-income ratios, even soft inquiries from shopping around for loans. If your son's hiding something, the numbers won't lie. Within an hour, Robert had learned more than he'd bargained for. Brian's credit file showed multiple recent inquiries, payday loan companies, high-interest personal loan providers, even a desperate search for home equity options. But what caught Robert's banker instincts was something else entirely. Tom, these employment reports don't match what I know about Brian's income. Self-employment gets tricky, easy to underreport, especially with freelance work. Tom highlighted several discrepancies on the screen. See this LLC registration? Hayes Digital Solutions, filed 6 months ago. That's not showing up on his loan applications. Robert memorized every detail. That afternoon, he drove to the downtown library and used their public computers to dig deeper. Hayes Digital Solutions had been busy. Web development contracts totaling over $25,000 in the past year. Money that somehow hadn't appeared on Brian's tax returns or loan applications. Chelsea's Instagram provided another treasure trove. Brand partnerships with local businesses, sponsored posts for fitness supplements, affiliate marketing links that generated steady income. All of it meticulously documented through her social media history, none of it reported to the IRS. The tax evasion was almost elegant in its simplicity. Brian and Chelsea had created parallel income streams while claiming financial hardship on official documents. They'd gambled with casino money while applying for need-based assistance. They'd bought luxury items while pleading poverty to family. At the library's secure terminal, Robert crafted his report to the IRS with the precision of 30 years in financial compliance. Form 3949A, information referral filled out in careful detail, specific dates, approximate income amounts, bank account numbers he'd glimpsed on Brian's phone during their last meeting. The language was professional, the evidence comprehensive. Taxpayers Brian Hayes and Chelsea Hayes. SSN XXXXXXX and XXXXXX appear to have unreported income from self-employment activities during tax years 2022, 2023, and 2024. Hayes Digital Solutions, LLC, and Instagram affiliate marketing income estimated at $40,000 plus annually. He submitted the forms electronically, each click of the mouse feeling like justice served cold. Within days, the signs appeared on Chelsea's Instagram stories. Fewer posts about shopping hauls, a canceled spa day, Brian's location tags showing increased visits to the casino, desperation betting instead of recreational gambling. Their stress leaked through carefully curated feeds like cracks and expensive makeup. Robert watched it all unfold from his quiet house, Margaret's memory steady beside him. The first domino had fallen, triggered by their own greed and dishonesty. But this was just the beginning, a betrayal that had ignited the fire of justice in him. His son had chosen important things over family. Now those important things were about to become very expensive indeed. The IRS letter arrived on a Tuesday. Brian called me that evening, his voice different, strained, like wire stretched too tight. Dad, I was wondering, could Chelsea and I come by this weekend? We brought some flowers from Mom's garden. Saturday afternoon, they stood on my doorstep holding orchids, Margaret's favorites, though they'd never remembered that when she was alive. Chelsea wore a conservative navy dress instead of her usual Instagram-ready outfits. her smile wide enough to crack porcelain. "Robert, these are for you, for Margaret's memory." Brian's rehearsed words came out too fast, his expensive watch absent for once. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately." I invited them in, watching Chelsea's eyes dart around the living room like she was cataloging assets. She paused at Margaret's piano, running manicured fingers along the keys she'd never heard my wife play. "It's so nice to spend time together as a family," Chelsea cooed, settling onto the couch with practiced grace. "Margaret always made me feel so welcome here. She was like the mother I never had." Brian perched on the edge of his chair, nervous energy radiating from every muscle. "Dad, I know I haven't been the best son lately. The truth is, I've been struggling with depression since Mom passed." "It's been so hard watching him," Chelsea added, reaching for Brian's hand with theatrical concern. "We're worried about his mental health. The doctor says he needs therapy, but it's expensive. $200 per session." I served coffee in Margaret's good china, the cups she'd saved for special occasions that Brian had never thought were special enough. "Therapy sounds important. Which doctor are you seeing?" "Dr. Martinez," Brian said quickly. "Downtown practice. Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's a demanding schedule." I stirred my coffee slowly. "How do you manage it with work?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Brian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I make time for what matters." "Of course. Though I noticed on Facebook, Chelsea's post from Tuesday at that new steakhouse. Expensive-looking meal." Chelsea's smile flickered. "We needed a break from all the stress. Margaret always said families should support each other through difficult times." "Interesting timing," I continued, my voice mild as spring rain. "Tuesday therapy, Tuesday dinner. Must have been a very effective session." Brian's patience snapped like a dry branch. "Why are you being so difficult? We came here to reconnect, to honor Mom's memory, and you're interrogating us like criminals." "We're family, Robert." Chelsea's voice rose an octave. "This is what families do. They help each other. They don't play games and ask trick questions." The mask was slipping beautifully. I set down my cup with deliberate care. "You're absolutely right, Chelsea. Families do help each other. They show up when it matters most." "I know I made mistakes," Brian said, desperation creeping into his voice. "But I'm trying to be better. Mom would want us to work through this." "Don't." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "Don't you ever speak for your mother again." The silence stretched like a funeral shroud. Brian and Chelsea exchanged glances, their performance crumbling around them like cheap stage props. "Fine." Brian stood abruptly. "We tried. But don't expect us to keep begging for scraps of affection from someone who's clearly lost his compassion." They left without the orchids, which sat wilting on my coffee table like their abandoned attempt at manipulation. I waited until their car disappeared before picking up the phone to make another call. I waited until morning to make the call. Harold Mitchell had been investigating insurance fraud for 25 years, and his downtown office still smelled like the cigarettes he'd quit a decade ago. "Family matter?" Harold's weathered face showed no judgment as I explained my needs. "I've seen plenty of those, usually messier than corporate cases. I need a background check on my son, financial records, activities, associations." I slid the $2,000 retainer across his desk. Complete picture. Discreet investigation, detailed report. Harold pocketed the cash with professional efficiency. "Any particular concerns?" "Gambling, dishonesty, poor judgment." The words felt clinical, like symptoms I was reporting to Margaret's oncologist. "He's been making questionable choices." Harold's first report arrived a week later in a manila envelope thick with photographs and documentation. Brian's face stared back at me from a dozen casino security cameras, his expressions ranging from cocky confidence to desperate frustration. "Silver Dollar Casino, 3 times per week minimum." Harold's typed summary read, "Credit card statements show $15,000 in losses over 6 months. Subject displays classic pattern of escalating bets following losses. Casino host David Kowalski treats subject and spouse as valued customers with complimentary meals and room offers. The photos told their own story. Brian at poker tables, Chelsea feeding slot machines with mechanical precision, both of them caught in the golden glow of neon and false hope. One timestamp showed them there until 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the same Tuesday they'd claimed Brian was in therapy. But Harold's investigation had uncovered something even more damaging. Employment violations documented at Innovate Tech Solutions, the report continued. Subject uses company equipment for personal freelance projects, installs unauthorized software, maintains irregular hours with frequent early departures. The evidence packet was comprehensive. 47 instances of policy violations over 8 months, time-stamped badge entries showing 2-hour lunches, security footage of Brian accessing company files for personal use. Harold had even documented Brian's side consulting work using his employer's software licenses. Corporate policies clearly state personal use constitutes grounds for termination, Harold noted. HR department would be very interested in this documentation. I studied the photographs in my kitchen while Margaret's coffee maker gurgled its morning ritual. Brian's face looked different in the casino images. Predatory, desperate. Nothing like the son who'd graduated magna cum laude with our money. That afternoon, I drove to the downtown library and used their public computers to craft a professional complaint to Innovate Tech Solutions. My banking background served me well. I knew exactly how HR departments processed anonymous reports, specific dates, policy violations, cross-reference with employee handbook sections, photographic evidence attached as supporting documentation. Employee Brian Hayes, IDs World War 751, has violated multiple company policies regarding equipment use, time management, and software licensing agreements. I typed with careful precision. Documentation includes security footage from March 15th, showing unauthorized software installation, badge records indicating irregular attendance patterns, and evidence of personal business conducted using company resources. I printed multiple copies, each one meticulously organized in professional folders. The same attention to detail I'd used reviewing loan applications for 3 decades now served a different purpose entirely. From the library parking lot, I could see Innovate Tech's glass building where Brian worked his reduced hours. Tomorrow would bring the first real consequences of his choices, consequences that had nothing to do with birthday parties or family obligations and everything to do with professional conduct. The building's windows reflected the afternoon sun like 1,000 watching eyes. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching employees come and go, wondering if any of them knew what Brian had been doing in their midst. The call came during my morning coffee. Harold's voice carried satisfaction like honey on warm bread. It's starting. Brian had been summoned to HR at 9 a.m. sharp. Linda Chang, Innovate Tech's Human Resources Director, had spread the evidence across her conference table like playing cards in a rigged game. Security footage, badge records, software logs. Everything Harold had documented now served as exhibits in Brian's professional trial. The unauthorized software installations alone constitute serious misconduct, Linda had explained while Brian sat frozen in his chair. But combined with time theft and equipment misuse, we're looking at potential termination. Harold had positioned himself in the coffee shop across the street, watching through telephoto lens as Brian emerged from the building 40 minutes later. His face was pale as winter sky, his usual confident stride reduced to an uncertain shuffle. Formal warning issued, Harold reported. 30-day probation with salary reduction. One more violation, and he's gone. But Brian's workplace crisis was only the opening act. Chelsea's carefully constructed influencer empire was crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. 3 major sponsors had dropped her overnight after receiving anonymous complaints about her lifestyle choices. NutriFit canceled her $5,000 supplement contract after being sent photographs of Chelsea at casino slot machines. Our brand represents healthy choices and financial responsibility, their terse email explained. BeautyBox removed her from their influencer program entirely, citing incompatible values with their family-friendly image. The complaints had been professional, thorough, and devastating. Each sponsor received detailed documentation of Chelsea's gambling activities, screenshots of her spending-heavy Instagram posts juxtaposed with her requests for family financial support, and carefully worded concerns about her authentic representation of your brand values. Chelsea's Instagram engagement plummeted as followers began questioning her lifestyle posts in the comments. "How can you afford designer bags but need family money?" one user wrote. "Maybe spend less at casinos and more time being grateful?" added another. By Thursday afternoon, Brian was pounding on my front door with the fury of someone whose carefully constructed lies were collapsing around him. "You're doing this to us." His voice cracked with accusation as he pushed past me into the living room. "The timing is too perfect, Dad. The anonymous reports, the sudden investigations. This has your fingerprints all over it." I settled into Margaret's reading chair with the calm of someone who'd prepared for this moment. "That's quite an accusation, Brian. Do you have any proof?" "I don't need proof." He began searching the room frantically, checking desk drawers, examining my computer. "I know you, and I know this isn't coincidence." His phone buzzed with another call from Chelsea. Through the speaker, I could hear her tears mixing with hysteria. "My whole career's ruined, Brian. 5 years of building my brand, and it's gone overnight." "This is about the money, isn't it?" Brian turned on me with desperate fury. "Because I asked for help instead of just taking it like you think I deserve?" "I'm retired, Brian. I garden. I read books. I visit your mother's grave." Each word came out measured, precise. "If someone's investigating your activities, perhaps you should consider why." The beautiful thing about truth was its weight. Brian could search my house, examine my computer, demand answers all he wanted, but he'd never find evidence of something I'd been careful not to leave behind. His coworkers were already whispering, Harold reported. Lunch conversation stopped when Brian approached. Email threads suddenly excluded him. The social isolation that came with being under investigation was almost worse than the formal warnings. By Friday, Chelsea had posted a desperate Instagram story trying to address the false rumors about her lifestyle. The video was raw, unfiltered, her usual polished presentation abandoned for genuine panic. But authenticity looked wrong on her, like an expensive coat, worn inside out. That evening through my kitchen window, I watched them leave together in Brian's car. Their body language spoke of argument, of blame, of a relationship strained past its breaking point. Harold had mentioned they'd started researching private investigators, probably hoping to find evidence of my involvement. They were welcome to try. I'd learned from the best in the business. St. Mark's Episcopal felt different that Sunday morning. I'd chosen my moment carefully, arriving early for coffee hour after the service when the congregation gathered to share news and gossip like communion wine. Pastor Williams approached with his usual gentle concern. "Robert, how are you managing? We've missed seeing Brian at services lately." The opening I'd been waiting for. "He's been busy with other priorities, work commitments, social obligations." I let the words hang in the air like incense smoke. You know how young people are these days. Mrs. Henderson, who'd taught Brian in Sunday school 20 years ago, leaned in with the hunger of someone who sensed a story. "Oh my, yes. Though I was surprised not to see him at Margaret's service. Such a devoted mother deserves a devoted son's presence." He had other priorities that day. The phrase came out with just enough reluctance to suggest painful honesty. "Important things," he said. "More important than saying goodbye to his mother." The coffee cup in Mrs. Henderson's hand trembled slightly. "Other priorities? At Margaret's funeral?" Pastor Williams' face showed the exact mixture of shock and disappointment I'd hoped for. Surely there was some emergency, medical situation. A birthday party. I let the words drop like stones into still water. For a college friend. Brian felt it was more important than his mother's funeral. The silence spread through the coffee hour like spilled wine staining white linen. 23 people heard those words. 23 pillars of Spokane's tight-knit community who'd watched Margaret volunteer at bake sales and teach vacation Bible school for 4 decades. By Monday afternoon, Mrs. Henderson had called every member of her book club. The story reached the Garden Society by Tuesday, the bank's retired employees group by Wednesday. Each retelling added weight to the scandal, emphasis to the betrayal. "Can you imagine?" became the refrain echoing through grocery store checkout lines and coffee shop conversations. Missing his own mother's funeral for a party? The Facebook post appeared on Thursday in our neighborhood community group. Someone had found the birthday party photos, Brian laughing with his friend while I'd stood alone at Margaret's graveside. The timestamp was visible in the corner, 2:47 p.m., exactly when her casket had been lowered into frozen ground. Chelsea's Instagram followers began abandoning her in droves. Local businesses that had followed her content the coffee shop, the boutique, the yoga studio, suddenly found her lifestyle posts offensive rather than aspirational. Comments turned sharp as broken glass. How could you miss your mother-in-law's funeral? Appeared under her latest post about gratitude and family bonds. Some priorities are more important than others, apparently. The social isolation struck faster than I'd anticipated. Memorial Day barbecue invitations that should have arrived never materialized. Chelsea's usual table at Grind Coffee sat empty when she tried to work there, other patrons' conversations stopping when she entered. Brian's gym buddies became suddenly busy when he suggested weekend plans. Neighbors who'd waved for years now offered only curt nods. Even their dry cleaner, Mrs. Kim, who'd known Margaret since the 80s, began treating them with professional coldness. Chelsea's Instagram engagement dropped 40% in a week. The lifestyle content that had once seemed aspirational now looked tone-deaf, privileged, cruel. Her attempts to address the situation only made things worse. I understand people are upset, she posted in a raw, unfiltered video. But Brian was grieving in his own way. Sometimes people need space to process loss. The comments were brutal. Space? He had space. At a birthday party. Your mother-in-law deserved better. Grief doesn't mean abandoning family. By Sunday evening, I found Chelsea crying in her car outside the grocery store, phone pressed to her ear. Through my rearview mirror, I could see her shoulders shaking as she spoke to someone. Probably her mother. Maybe a friend from out of town. Someone who might still offer sympathy for their rapidly shrinking world. The phone calls home were getting desperate. I could almost hear them planning their next move, their next manipulation, their next attempt to extract money from the father who'd watched his wife die while his son chose cake and party hats over family loyalty. But they'd underestimated how small Spokane really was, how long memories lasted in a community that had loved Margaret Hayes for 42 years. The fire of justice I lit was spreading now, beyond my control, into every corner of their carefully constructed lives. The eviction notice arrived on a Thursday. I watched from my kitchen window as Brian tore open the certified mail, his face crumpling like wet paper when he read the contents. 3 weeks of social exile had accelerated their financial collapse faster than even I'd anticipated. Brian's termination from Innovate Tech Solutions had been swift and final. No severance, no references, just a security escort to the parking lot with his belongings in a cardboard box. Chelsea's Instagram empire had withered to a $200 monthly trickle from her previous $3,000 average. Brand partnerships evaporated overnight when sponsors received detailed documentation of her casino visits and lifestyle contradictions. The influencer marketplace was unforgiving to damaged reputations. Their mortgage was $2,400 behind with a second missed payment, triggering automatic foreclosure proceedings. Chelsea's BMW lease had been terminated, the car repossessed from their apartment complex parking lot, while neighbors watched through their windows like it was evening entertainment. Credit cards maxed at $31,000 across 7 accounts couldn't cover minimum payments anymore. Their joint checking account showed $347 remaining, barely enough for groceries, definitely not enough for dignity. I watched Brian attempt freelance work from his laptop at the coffee shop, but his professional reputation had been torched by whispered conversations and anonymous reviews. Unreliable. Character concerns, integrity issues followed his name through Spokane's tight-knit business community like smoke from a house fire. Chelsea had tried launching an OnlyFans account in desperation, but even that lasted only 3 days before being banned for terms violations. The platform had standards, apparently. They'd started selling everything with value. Designer clothes went to consignment shops for pennies on the dollar. Electronics found their way to pawn shops on Division Street. I'd seen Chelsea emerge from Murphy's Pawn with tears streaming down her face, clutching $400 for Margaret's heirloom ring, the one my wife had passed down hoping it would mean something to family. Their arguments echoed through the apartment complex walls with increasing frequency and volume. Neighbors had begun calling management about noise disturbances. Maybe if you weren't so focused on your image, we wouldn't be drowning in credit card debt. Brian's voice carried through their thin walls like a confession. Don't you dare blame me for your gambling problem. Chelsea's response was sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't force you to lose $15,000 at poker tables. The lease termination notice gave them 30 days to vacate. Their landlord, Mr. Patterson, had been polite but firm when they'd begged for an extension. I need 3 months rent up front, plus security deposit, or you're out by the 15th, he'd explained. I've got families waiting who can actually pay their bills. Chelsea's parents had refused to help after learning about the funeral absence, adding family rejection to their mountain of problems. Brian's credit union had frozen their remaining account for overdrafts, leaving them completely cash poor. Job interviews had become exercises in futility. Somehow Brian's reputation preceded him to every opportunity. Character concerns and cultural fit issues were the polite rejections. The real reason was simpler. Spokane remembered, and Spokane talked. Thursday evening found them sitting at their kitchen table, bankruptcy forms spread between them like surrender documents. Chelsea's makeup was smeared. Brian's 3-day stubble made him look homeless. The apartment that had once showcased their success now felt like a tomb for their ambitions. The phone rang. Unknown number from downtown. The Silver Dollar Casino's parking lot was nearly empty at 9 a.m. Tony Ricci had agreed to meet me before the morning rush, his weathered face showing the kind of experience that came from 20 years in collections. Your son's been a regular customer for 8 months, Tony explained as we walked through the casino's business office. Nice kid, terrible judgment. Him and the wife both. The debt paperwork spread across Tony's desk told a story of escalating desperation. $23,000 in gambling losses, mostly from poker tables and slot machines. The casino had been patient, offering payment plans and restructuring options, but patience had limits in the collections business. I want to help resolve their situation, I said, producing my checkbook. What would you take for a cash settlement on the debt? Tony's eyebrows lifted slightly. Business was business, especially when it involved immediate cash versus months of collection efforts. Full debt purchase. We could do $12,000. That's 52%. You'd own the debt completely. All collection rights transfer to you. The legal documents were surprisingly simple. Debt assignment papers, payment verification, collection authority transfer, all notarized and filed with the county recorder's office. For $12,000, I'd just become my son's primary creditor. Fair warning, Tony added as we shook hands. Collection laws are strict. 30-day notice, proper documentation, legal procedures. But wage garnishment and asset seizure are definitely on the table if they don't pay. I spent the next 3 days studying debt collection law with the same precision I'd once applied to mortgage applications. The legal framework was elegant in its simplicity. Proper notice, reasonable payment terms, escalating consequences for non-compliance. My demand letter was professionally crafted, typed on legal letterhead I'd purchased downtown. 30 days to pay in full, daily interest accruing at legal maximums, clear warnings about wage garnishment, and asset seizure. But I'd added personal touches that no collection agency would include. 2 photographs were paper-clipped to the documents. The first showed Margaret's funeral, me standing alone beside her casket, the empty space where Brian should have been standing. The second was from his friend's birthday party, Brian laughing with cake frosting on his fingers, timestamp visible, 2:47 p.m. The personal note was handwritten in my careful script. This is what disappointment costs. You chose a birthday party over your mother's funeral. Now choose how you'll pay for that decision. Friday afternoon, I drove to their apartment complex and climbed the stairs to Unit 3B. The door was thin enough that I could hear Chelsea crying inside, muffled voices discussing something urgent. I knocked 3 times. Brian opened the door expecting a pizza delivery, his face dropping when he saw me holding the legal envelope. Dad? What are you doing here? Brian. Chelsea. I stepped into their living room without invitation, noting the empty spaces where furniture had been sold. I have some documents you need to review. Chelsea emerged from the bedroom, her eyes red and swollen. Robert? Is everything okay? I handed Brian the envelope with ceremonial precision. I've purchased your gambling debt from Silver Dollar Casino. $23,000. Now legally owed to me personally. Brian's hand shook as he read the papers. You can't do this to your own son. I didn't do this, Brian. You did this to yourself at your mother's funeral. Each word came out measured, final. I'm simply providing consequences for choices you made. Chelsea grabbed the documents, scanning frantically. This can't be legal. You can't just buy someone's debt. It's completely legal. Debt assignment is common practice. I gestured toward the papers. You have 30 days to pay in full, or I begin wage garnishment proceedings. Asset seizure follows within 60 days. Brian sank into their remaining chair, understanding dawning across his face like sunrise after a long, dark night. You've been planning this? Everything, the investigations, the reports, the social isolation, all of it. Your mother asked me to take care of you. This is me taking care of you. I moved toward the door, my business concluded. Some lessons cost more than others. That evening, the phone call started. Brian arrived at my door at 6 a.m., unshaven and desperate. I'd been expecting him, my coffee already brewed, morning light filtering through Margaret's kitchen curtains, like a benediction. Dad, please, we need to talk. His voice cracked on the words, exhaustion written in every line of his face. I let him in without speaking, settling at the kitchen table where Margaret and I had shared 42 years of morning conversations. Brian stood awkwardly by the counter, his expensive clothes wrinkled and stained, the uniform of someone whose world had collapsed. I know I messed up. I know I was wrong about the funeral, about everything. His words tumbled out like water through a broken dam. But this debt thing, you're destroying us completely. I sipped my coffee and waited. Desperation had its own timeline, and Brian needed to reach the bottom before he could begin climbing back up. I'll work for you to pay it off. I'll do whatever you want. Just, please don't take everything we have left. He pulled out his phone, showing missed calls from Chelsea. She's talking about leaving, Dad, going back to her parents, starting over without me. Sit down, Brian. He collapsed into Margaret's chair like a marionette with cut strings. I reached into the kitchen drawer and produced a ledger I'd kept meticulously for 15 years. Every dollar, every loan, every bailout documented with banker's precision. College tuition at Gonzaga, I began, reading from pages worn soft with handling. $84,000 over 4 years. Your mother worked double shifts at the hospital to help cover costs. Brian's face went pale. House down payment assistance, $25,000. Car loans I co-signed when your credit was insufficient, $31,000 across 3 vehicles. Emergency bailouts for credit card debt, failed business ventures, and other financial emergencies, $18,000 across 7 separate incidents. The numbers filled the kitchen like Margaret's ghost, each figure representing sacrifice he'd never acknowledged. Wedding contribution because Chelsea's family couldn't afford the reception she wanted, $15,000. Total investment in your future, $173,000 over 15 years. I closed the ledger and looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time since Margaret's funeral. Your mother took on extra nursing shifts until she was exhausted. She sold her grandmother's jewelry to help pay for your wedding. She skipped lunches to send you spending money in college. Brian's tears started silently, understanding finally dawning. She died believing you'd become a good man. She made me promise to always support you, no matter what. My voice caught on Margaret's memory. Her last words were about you, Brian, about your potential, your future, your heart. I know I failed you and Mom. His voice was barely a whisper. Tell me how to fix this. I'll do anything. Anything except show up when it mattered most. The silence stretched between us like the years of disappointed hope, broken promises, and enablement disguised as love. There is one way, I said finally. Complete financial transparency. Every account, every transaction, every penny. Gambling counseling with regular attendance verification. 6 months of volunteer work at Sacred Heart Hospice, helping people face death with dignity. Brian nodded frantically. Yes, all of it. Whatever you want. And a public apology at St. Mark's Episcopal? To the community that loved your mother? To the people who watched you grow up? To everyone who expected better from Margaret Hayes' son? He swallowed hard but didn't hesitate. When? Sunday morning. Pastor Williams has already agreed to include it in the service. Brian wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What about the debt? Complete the conditions, and the debt disappears. fail at any point, and collection proceeds immediately. We shook hands across Margaret's kitchen table, the same hands that had once taught him to tie shoes and throw baseballs, now sealing his path to redemption. Sunday morning came too quickly. St. Mark's Episcopal was fuller than usual that Sunday. Word had spread through Spokane's interconnected community about Brian's planned apology, drawing curious congregation members who remembered the scandal of the missed funeral. I sat in my usual pew, 3 rows from the front, watching Brian and Chelsea fidget nervously in the front row. Chelsea wore a simple black dress, no designer labels, no Instagram-worthy accessories, just the humility of someone who'd lost everything and was trying to find their way back. Pastor Williams introduced the special testimony with gentle words about forgiveness and second chances. Brian walked to the pulpit with shaking hands, the same podium where eulogies for his mother had been delivered 4 months earlier. "My name is Brian Hayes," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary. 4 months ago, I failed the most important test of being a son. The congregation sat in complete silence, even the children sensing the gravity of the moment. The day my mother Margaret was laid to rest, I chose to attend a birthday party instead of her funeral. I told my father I had important business to attend to, but the truth was simpler and uglier. I was selfish, immature, and took my family for granted. Mrs. Henderson dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Other faces showed mixtures of surprise and recognition as Brian's words confirmed the rumors they'd whispered about for months. I compounded that betrayal by asking my grieving father for money, using my mother's memory to manipulate his emotions. I dishonored the woman who sacrificed everything for my success, who worked extra shifts to pay for my education, who believed in my potential even when I didn't deserve it. The raw honesty in his voice carried more weight than any prepared speech. This wasn't performance. This was a soul stripped bare in front of his community. I've struggled with gambling addiction, dishonesty, and entitlement. I've hurt my wife, disappointed my father, and betrayed the memory of the best woman I ever knew. Brian's voice broke slightly. Margaret Hayes deserved a better son. This community deserved a better neighbor. My father deserved a better man to carry on his family name. The standing ovation started slowly, Mrs. Henderson rising first, then spreading through the congregation like grace made visible. Even I found myself standing, pride and grief warring in my chest as I watched my son take responsibility for the first time in his adult life. After the service, the coffee hour buzzed with conversations about second chances and the power of genuine remorse. Mrs. Henderson approached Brian with tears in her eyes, offering forgiveness and support for his recovery. Other church members followed, the community that had shunned them now extending tentative hands of reconciliation. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Memorial Park alone, carrying white roses, Margaret's favorites. Her headstone was simple granite, engraved with the words devoted wife and mother, though they seemed insufficient to capture 42 years of unconditional love. "He apologized today, Maggie," I said to the carved stone, arranging flowers in the bronze vase. "Really apologized, not just sorry for getting caught. The whole church heard him take responsibility." A gentle breeze stirred the cemetery trees, and I imagined Margaret's approval in the whisper of leaves. "I think you'd be proud of how it ended. Justice was served, but mercy had the final word. He's starting volunteer work at Sacred Heart Hospice next week, helping people face their final days with dignity." I knelt to adjust the roses. Maybe losing everything will teach him what really matters. 2 months later, Brian called to invite me to dinner, the first family meal we'd shared since Margaret's diagnosis. He was working 40 hours a week at the hospice, helping elderly patients write letters to estranged family members, reading to those who couldn't see clearly anymore, simply sitting with people who faced death alone. Chelsea had transformed her social media presence, documenting volunteer work instead of designer purchases, sharing resources for gambling addiction instead of lifestyle aspiration. Her follower count had dropped to 12,000, but her engagement was more meaningful than it had ever been. The debt payment plan was progressing steadily. Every dollar came with receipts, every expense justified, every financial decision transparent. Brian had earned $3,200 working double shifts at the hospice, applying every penny toward his obligations. On Margaret's birthday in June, we worked together in her garden. The roses she'd planted, the vegetables she'd tended, the small patch of earth where she'd found peace during her chemotherapy treatments. Brian's hands were calloused now from honest work, his face showing the kind of tiredness that came from purpose rather than desperation. Mom would have loved seeing these roses bloom, he said, pruning dead branches with careful precision. She planted them hoping you'd help me tend them someday, I replied, watching my son, really my son, not the entitled stranger who'd skipped his mother's funeral, work with quiet concentration. The garden grew strong that summer, nourished by attention it had been missing, tended by hands that had finally learned the difference between taking and giving. Margaret would have been proud of what grew from the ashes of our burned-down family. Not perfection, but something real and honest and worth cultivating. Important things had finally learned their proper place, and family had found its way home. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.